Welcome back to the X Podcast. I am, and I'm just going to say it, at the Carlson table, and I am sitting across from Tim Cowboy Moore, fresh back from Dallas, Texas. We're not going to say that name. No, okay, that's not it anymore. Pastor Timothy Moore is here with us, and we have a very special guest. Addie over L.A. is with us today.
You finally got it right that time.
Over L.A.
Over L.A. I just wanted to add some West Coast flair to it.
You said overlay for a good 3 months.
Yeah, you never corrected me.
Overlay. You know, I'm just not going to be like, it's overlay.
Yeah.
It is overlay.
I did find that out last week.
Where is overlay from?
That's a good question.
No one knows.
This is my married name, so should probably do that research.
It's probably made up. It's like, you know when there are different times back generations. There's times when people were just like, "Hey, I want to assume a different name." I don't know. I've never heard of overlay.
You know what? Since we're very late to playing pickleball in this great weather, I just want you to know,
I played tons of pickleball in Texas.
I don't want to hear that. Because I'm
warmed up, ready to go.
I'm your teammate.
I know.
Me and him make a pretty potent team. I'm just gonna brag about it, honestly. But
we'll take on you and Solomon anytime.
I would actually love that.
When was it? Was it Tuesday of last week? I don't know. Someday last week.
Yeah.
Alana and I took on.
Who won?
Her and
Okay.
All
right. Listen, I endured injuries.
Look at that.
Ooh.
For all those watching and not just listening, I'm showing my massive pickleball welt.
Was that from an actual pickleball?
Yeah.
That wasn't like a racket. That wasn't like Solomon hit you with an accident swinging. You got nailed with
caused this, but it was from an actual pickleball pelting my body.
Was it a spike? Somebody spiked it on you? Was it?
Wasn't that during our game?
No. That was when y'all playing a couple days later.
Oh.
Okay, but I want to introduce our guest. Addie is amazing. She is somebody. We were talking about this right before we hit record. It's kind of a surreal moment, a little bit, because Addie is somebody joined our staff
4 months ago.
4 months
ago. Has it really been 4 months?
I know, isn't that crazy?
Oh, crazy. I thought I was just gonna say like 2 months ago. I didn't realize it's been 4 months.
I know time is becoming like a an irrelevant construct. But anyways, okay, so for 4 months, but what's crazy is you've been aware of our church, attending off and on for a couple years.
Like 2.
2 years. You were on staff somewhere, but, when there wasn't an event going on, you jump into EXCO or young adult stuff, and you just loved it. But you've been listening to the podcast on a weekly basis for about 2 years.
Wow.
I remember, when we first started interviewing her, I would begin to, share. But, our culture, she'd be like, I remember when you and Pastor Tim talked about it on the podcast, blah, 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 blah. And so you were sharing, this kind of a surreal moment.
It is. I feel like I was a groupie, and now I'm a part of the group.
Yeah.
So I love that. But what a lot of people may not know, they're listening to this, is you have your own podcast.
Yeah.
Called Christ in Me.
With Addie.
With Addie. Christ in Me with Addie. And so I just remember this young girl. I would see you. I remember seeing you at Christmas. And I remember I was doing a Q&A. I think it was me, Tucker, and somebody else were doing a Q&A speaking at one of the young adult nights, and saw you out there. And someone was just talking about what a great spirit you had, how cool of a story you are. You could just feel your heart for God. And that also, you built a bit of an influence of your own podcast. And we'll get to that. But I kind of want to just go back to the origin story. Back to when the spider originally bit Peter Parker. What was the proverbial spider? I'm kidding. Take us back to early days. Are you from Ohio?
Yeah, I'm from Ohio.
From Ohio.
I've lived a bit of everywhere, but I grew up in northern Ohio, kind of in a town of more cows than people. So
really,
yeah, very rural.
Cowtown.
What's a well-known city in northern Ohio?
Toledo,
Cleveland.
Oh, Toledo.
Akron,
oh, Cleveland.
Sandusky.
Cedar Point is basically its own city at this point.
Okay. Okay. All right. So grew up in northern Ohio. What was growing up there like? Family life? I mean, you don't have to go into whatever you want to, but
yeah, I think I was blessed with a really peaceful childhood up until my teen years, And I was like a creek kid. I was a horse girl.
Mm-hmm.
Like
a Greek kid.
A creek.
Go creeking.
Okay. I was like,
Put on the tall boots and go out and play in the creek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like no video games, no Wi-Fi. Just
why
go
am I
out.
picturing that movie that came out last year of the girl that what was the mystery of the girl that ended up committing murder?
Oh yeah. Don't know.
Don't think that's my
Crawdaddy
story.
Creek.
I don't think she committed murder.
Crawdads.
Where the crawdad lies, or
the
something like that.
Yeah,
Something
you know what I'm talking about. Why did I just picture you
Yeah.
as the girl in the Crawdad movie?
Yeah.
I don't think that's a compliment.
No, I don't know. She was strange. She lived
was
on her
awesome.
own, and she was yeah.
But
Actually-
anyways, okay, so it was an idyllic childhood until
Mhm. Until my parents got divorced when I was 13. And I think that's where things kind of got like just everything took a 180. We grew up, so my family's like super Catholic. My dad's a deacon. I have 3 priest uncles and one's a bishop.
Wow.
And then I'm also the only girl on my dad's side of the family, and I was raised by my dad in 76 years. So it was like
About
a
76
lot
siblings.
of
76 years.
testosterone and expectations, you know.
Whoa.
Wow. Siblings?
I have 3 brothers.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah.
No sisters. Are there any other girls on that side of the family
No.
even yet?
My dad is from a family of 7 boys and only 2 of them married, and they didn't have any kids. So I really am the only girl.
Wait, your dad's 7 boys, 2 married. So literally you have that entire, well, I guess he had you, but that entire line and even their name. What's your maiden name?
Woost, which I was happy to trade for
Woost.
overlap.
But I'm like, I think about these things because I only had girls, and my sister had a girl, and my brother ended up with a boy and 2 girls. Because I've tried to convince both of my daughters as they've gotten married, one's getting married. I'm like, are you sure you don't want to just keep our name or do a hyphenated name? You know, they're taking a different name. So they literally have there's no Woos passing on through your dad.
Well, actually, my brother just had the first girl since me of our family, him and his wife. Her name's Olivia. And so
Yeah, but she may not keep name either.
this is true,
Right?
but she has since dethroned me. So, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, it's interesting. So you grew up in a male world.
Yeah, pretty much.
Interesting.
And now look at this table.
Now you're sitting at a table with
This
more
table.
men. So that was your teenage years, right?
Yeah, so I grew up like really rural, really slow life. Like I think my graduating class in my hometown was 53 people, maybe 60. So it was really small. And then my family actually moved to Colorado when I was in like early middle school.
What part?
We lived in Longmont, which is like I think
that?
north of Boulder.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh,
I know where that is.
interesting. Boulder's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Boulder's very interesting.
Beautiful area.
Yeah. So then my parents got divorced in Colorado, and it was weird because then my dad moved us back to our same hometown that we grew up in. It's called New London. And so that was just really weird coming back and then kind of being like the talk of the town, and everybody had gone through puberty, and I was like, you don't look the same.
So what was you're how old at this point?
Well, my parents divorced when I was 13, so I was probably 13 going on 14.
13 going on 14. Moved to Colorado, come back. Parents are divorced. What is the mental, emotional, spiritual state of Addie at this time?
Well, I kind of took on the role of like the mom in the household.
Okay.
And my oldest brother, he just like didn't really want to, I guess, step up at the time. He was focused on like, I just want to go to college. But it's like someone has to drive us to school and someone has to like do laundry and like learn how to cook. And we did have a nanny, but she didn't really do much. She was kind of like the lowest of the low Yelp nannies that you could hire just because money was really tight then. Like my mom, she didn't make some of the best decisions coming out of the divorce, and it put us in a really bad like financial spot. And so it was just weird. Like we went from my dad getting the best job of his life in Colorado and like us living in the biggest house ever to then moving back to our same hometown, like having to pass my childhood house and then being in like a rented home that everyone knew like a drug dealer owned. So it was kind of nuts. Yeah.
And then somewhere in the middle of all this, I'm gonna hop around chronologically, so you can correct me. But you ended up in Key West.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just a time of like sampling key lime pies, but
I mean, I did definitely do that. I
I
always
actually,
joke.
let me tell you, I had my first key lime pie in Key West.
We
Fell
have
in
to.
love.
Yeah.
Fell in love. But
Where did you have it from? Do you remember?
No, you asked me this when we were at Combustion. I do not remember. I just remember it changed my life.
So I worked at Kermit's, which is like the OG key lime pie place. I had a pretty like innocent experience in Key West, but a lot of people do not. But this was like life pre-Jesus. So like growing up my whole life, I knew that I didn't really want to be Catholic. Like I just didn't understand the aspects of religion, and that's not a knock against Catholicism. I know like I have some Catholic friends now who I believe are like saved, like devout, know Christ, but for me it just was never my pocket of the world. And so when I went off to college, I did what most people do, where they just kind of are free from their parents and they go wild. And I had a lot of responsibility that I think other people didn't have growing up. So all the more I was like free to do whatever I wanted. So I actually met a guy in college, and we went to Heidelberg University, which was in Tiffin. I ended up transferring to Columbia in Chicago just because I didn't love Ohio and I wanted to try something else. And we stayed together. And so when I was towards the end
Wait,
of
is this where you met Nikita?
No, I didn't meet Nikita. This is one of my best friends, Nikita. I didn't meet her until I moved to Columbus.
Okay, because she went to Chicago.
She lived there for a little bit just because her brother lives there.
Okay.
Yeah. Sidetrack.
So this is a crazy story. Okay.
Yeah. So you moved to South Carolina?
I moved to Key West with him.
Oh, I thought for some reason you said Columbia. For some reason, I thought you said
Columbia University in Chicago.
Oh, yeah. Columbia University in Chicago.
Columbia College.
Columbia College. That's
like
right. Okay, I thought it was Columbia, South Carolina. Okay,
that's right. This stuff confuses me.
Yeah,
my first year here, somebody's like, "Yeah, we can't be at church this weekend. We're going to Miami University." Like, "You're going to Miami? That's awesome." They're like, "Yeah, we'll be back tomorrow." And I was like, "Tomorrow?" And they're like, "Oh, anyways, go ahead."
Yeah, so I went to Chicago. That guy that I met back at Heidelberg, we dated long distance, and then he moved to Key West, Florida with his family. And he was like, "Do you want to move down here with us?" And I was like, "Yeah, I want to retire at 22." So I moved to the island of Key West, and we lived on a boat together. And again, didn't know Jesus, so don't advise moving in with your significant other, but I did. And yeah, it wasn't great.
Why wasn't it great?
Key West is just like, okay, so have you seen OBX on Netflix?
Yep. Wait, is that Outer Banks?
Yeah.
The series?
Yes.
Yes, I've seen that.
It's kind like with John B. Yeah.
Yep.
It's kind
the
of
and the rich people.
It's kind of like that, where there's like a big divide between the people who are like wealthy and living down there like for vacation, and then the people who are just like barely making means, living off of tourism. A lot of people don't know, but the Royal Navy is also stationed there in attempts to control like how many people are trafficked from that area, like down to Cuba, the drugs that come in, and all kinds of stuff. So
the stories you're telling me, I was like, I never pictured Key West like that.
Oh, you don't know unless you live there, but there's a lot of crime. There's a lot of like heavy drug influence. Like most of it
prostitution.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. I remember still the first year that I was there, they have this thing called Fantasy Fest that happens every Halloween. And I had no idea that this happened. So I'm just working at a little key lime pie shop down there, and I see the bar.
You worked at a key lime pie shop.
I did. I was a walking, just what you would expect for Key West. So the bar across the street from me, I remember during Fantasy Fest, they wrapped their entire building in black plastic and just spray painted like XXX on it, and they were making adult films. So like I had no idea that that's what happens in Key West. And I remember actually my grandma, she let me know, she was like, "I have a friend who's gonna come visit you at your pie shop. She's down there for like the festival." And I was like, "For Fantasy Fest?" And this is when I still didn't know what it was. And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool. We'll tell her to come by. Like I'll be working this time." This woman walks in completely like topless in like a little fishnet like netting top, and she's like, "You must be Addie," and she's like walking towards me, and all I could see was like you know. And I called my grandma and I was like, "So that's your friend?" And she was like, "Well, I don't know her that well." So that's Key West. Like people go down there.
You said, "But I do now."
Yeah, I knew her a little too well. People go down there for like swinging. They go down there for all kinds of things, and I just couldn't wait to leave. Like the moment.
How long were you down there?
I was down there a little over a year.
Okay.
Yeah, didn't last long.
So what finally jettisoned you out?
Yeah, so in 2017, Hurricane Irma hit, I think in September, and it destroyed everything.
Yeah.
Like the whole island was pretty much underwater, and like FEMA was down there assessing damages. I technically was considered like a renter, and so I didn't actually get any FEMA aid or anything like that, and so I had nothing. Like all of my clothes molded because of the saltwater air, and my relationship with that guy was struggling at the time too, so honestly, I was just like, this is the final straw. I have nothing left, so like might as well just move back to Ohio, and that's what I did.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Move back where? With who?
I moved back in with my parents, which was like kind of rocky because I wasn't confirmed into the Catholic faith, I think like early teens, when a lot of Catholics are. Like I actually denied my confirmation, which kind of started the rut in my family. But I just knew that I had like a conviction against it, even though at the time it was probably more recognized as rebellion. And then moving back in with them was like a huge knock to my pride, and I was nervous about how it would go, but I mean, I had to pick back up somewhere, so I moved back in with them.
Wow.
Boomerang kid.
Yeah, pretty
How
much.
old were you when you moved back?
It was early 20s.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So where in this whole mix does the fitness journey come in?
Right here.
Okay.
Yeah. So after about 3 months, things just like did not work out living back home with my dad. We were so Catholic that it was like, if you are in this house, like you go to church on Sunday, or you don't get to use the car, you don't get to have like a cell phone on the family plan. Like there were a lot of aspects of control in it. And I love my dad, and our relationship is like so on the mend, which I'm so grateful for. And I'm finding that balance and like being honoring to my parents as I share like the truth of this story, but also recognizing how I'll probably be different if I have a family of my own someday. But it just did not work out. And so my mental health was in a terrible state, like fresh out of a breakup, had so many influences from the world saying like, you just need to get back out there and like go out drinking, like find a guy on Tinder. So I mean, that's what I did. I got on Tinder and I met a guy. And I started living out of my car, actually, because things were just getting so bad at home with my dad, and just like my mental health. It was better. I was fearful for like where my life would go and the decisions I would make. So it was better for me to live out of my car, at least independent, than it was for me to stay in the control of like that house. And so, I met this guy.
How long did you live out of your car?
It was for a little over like a summer. So it was about 3 to 6 months, I would say, on and off. Like I would stay the night on some friends' couches sometimes, or, bounce different places. But really where I found myself the most was the gym, because I found a cheap place for a gym membership, and I would use their showers there. I would use their Wi-Fi. And I was a manager at Ulta Beauty, and nobody knew that most nights after I locked up, I would like pretend to leave and then just like sleep in my car. So yeah, that's where I was at when I met this guy. And we actually started like working out a ton together. Like he was really into fitness. I started just like sharing my fitness journey online, and that's when like things with my Instagram started to pick up, but nobody knew that I was living out of my car. So
wow.
That's interesting.
For context, you mentioned the Instagram thing, because you have, was like 3.61 million?
What? No. I
but it's something
don't.
crazy, I think. What is it?
It's like 90,000 or 80,000.
Yeah. And so this all came through fitness
We don't
journey.
have to guess. I can just look it up while we're
Look
sitting
it
here.
up right now.
Oh.
I
Well,
know
let me
Tommy,
tell
who
you-
I work out with, is like, did you know that C-Bum's wife
Yeah.
follows Addie?
Courtney and I
I
had.
guess C-Bum, he's the most famous.
Hey, you're getting close to 100. You got 98.6.
Yeah, what are we going to do? Listen, if you are listening to this podcast and watching,
Oh
we
my
need to
gosh.
put
Go
Addie
follow
over
her.
the edge at Addie LA.
Addie over LA.
And if you'd like to see me blushing, just watch this back on YouTube later.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like really cringy to talk about. Like, I
Yeah.
really appreciate you plugging my podcast, or even talking about my Instagram, because now I really consider it like social media ministry is what I call it. But it wasn't always that. And so I will be the least quick to promote myself. So
You got into fitness.
yeah,
And
I got into fitness.
What did
I
that
signed,
look like?
Yeah, I just started posting a ton about my fitness journey, like about my nutritional habits and things like that. And
Was it hard to be what were your nutritional habits like living out of your car?
so
That's
it
a good
hadn't
question.
really started then.
Okay.
And I was dating this guy, so I would go to his house pretty much every night. I just wouldn't like stay there.
Gotcha.
And so we would usually make dinner together, and
gotcha.
I love to cook. So what we had kind of worked out is I would bring ingredients, like we'd cook together, and then I'd leave. And after a while, I finally told him like, hey, by the way, I actually don't live anywhere, just so you know. And then we ended up moving in together.
Yeah.
So I made,
Well, that's nice that he invited you to live with him.
Yeah, but I made that choice twice thinking the result would be different, and it wasn't.
And it wasn't any different?
No, still didn't know God at all in this
part
of my life.
Can I ask this? Not to put you on the spot, you don't have to answer, but I think you brought this up. You listened when we interviewed Kaylin.
Mm-hmm.
Not interviewed. We had her on the podcast, and just what a conversation.
Yeah.
We've had so much good feedback. But talking about like her anti-aging.
Yeah.
Talking about different procedures and things. And so you brought up that you're pretty open about some of that. What did that look like in your journey? Was it during this season?
Yeah, so I couldn't really afford any of that at this point in my life. So kind of to pick back up where you had asked PT, I was dating this guy. We moved to Columbus together, and that's when I got my job with WNCI on iHeartRadio, and that's where my Instagram got a ton of attraction because I was on air, every morning.
Where were you on air?
I was on air with Dave and Jimmy on WNCI.
You were on that? I've listened to that show for years.
Yeah.
You listened to Addie on the radio.
No, but I don't remember you on the show.
They made
do
me
the
go
radio
by-
voice. What did you say?
Wait, were you like one of the producer person they would hire?
I was like a social media manager, and then I just kept chiming in, so they finally gave me a mic. So that's
When
kind of
was that? Like, I've listened on
this
and off throughout the year.
This was like 2019 to 2020.
Really?
So I actually got like let go from that job in 2020,
Okay.
and then COVID hit. And so,
Do your spiel.
do I have to?
Can I hear it?
WNCI. No, I was kidding.
Okay.
So I was living with this guy. You kind of heard this part of the story. We were hustling in fitness. I mean, we were both quote unquote fitness influencers. Like we were gaining traction, signing contracts. You had brought up Courtney King and Chris Bumstead. We were both signed with Vital Proteins, and we were getting flown out for the most like crazy parties in LA and Chicago and New York, and like things were just so on the up, but nobody knew. I mean, things looked so like picturesque from Instagram, but nobody knew that behind the scenes I had just been homeless like 3 months prior. I had no relationship with my family. I didn't have a car at the time. Like I literally Ubered every day to WNCI because my boyfriend and I at the time shared a car. And so it was just a very like.
Yeah, but you weren't on top of the world. I mean, look, you got influence deals. You are traveling. You're posting your travels.
Yeah. And it looked awesome.
Okay, so was it not?
It was, but at the same time, like, I'll tell you the story of, like, one of the biggest parties I went to. I remember with Vital Proteins, they had a collaboration party for influencers in LA with Property Brothers. And the whole thing, you had to sign, like, an NDA. And
wait, are those the guys that do the fix-up, the brothers that are like twins?
Yeah.
And they do fix-up? Isn't that what they are? Are they I don't know if they're twins, but the two brothers, the Property Brothers?
I'm pretty sure that's them.
The show, right? On TLC or one of those networks?
I never met them there.
Okay.
But I met, like, Candace Swanpool was there, who's, like, one of the biggest Victoria's Secret, like, models, and some famous, like, athletes were there. And so I remember when you went in, you had to sign an NDA. And I remember the week of that.
Sign an NDA for the party?
Yeah. The week of that, I got, like, the most expensive pair of, like, nails I ever had. I got, like, the most expensive dress ever. I went out and bought, like, a Louis Vuitton. And I had my hair extensions. And I was done up to, like, the best of my ability as a cornfield girl from Ohio. Like, I felt like my most beautiful in that moment. And I remember as soon as I walked into that party and saw, I guess, like, what I was up against, I had never felt more low in my life. And it was, like, in that moment that I realized I literally can't win. Like, I cannot compete, and I'm going completely broke trying to look rich. And so if I had saved everything that I made during that time instead of trying to, like, compete with the world, maybe I would have been in a better place, could have bought a car, all those things. But instead, I was more focused on how I look to others. And I feel like that's one of the pales of Instagram, and, like, why I can't stand the word influencer now is because I know what goes on behind the scenes and how many people can get caught in this, like, comparison where they never feel good enough. And I've been at the seeming top. Like, we brought up Courtney King and Chris Bumstead. They're great people. But Chris has won the Mr. Olympia like 4 times now. Courtney won Miss Olympia once, and for those who don't know what that is, that's like the greatest bodybuilding feat of all time. And they were some at the time of the most, like, self-conscious people that I know, just in, like, their physiques. And, like, I would even put myself in that category. I would put the guy I was dating with in that category at the time. And it's like one of these things where you realize nobody's ever good enough, and we're all just trying to like battle one another for the spotlight. And that's when I took myself out of the running. Was like, I don't want to do this. I think I'll die doing this.
Did you have that revelation like before faith entered the picture for you?
I had that revelation before faith entered the picture, but I was very hopeless about it because I had put all my aspirations, all my like hopes and dreams, like the internet can take me anywhere, and I'm finally here at this like mansion party in LA, but it still wasn't enough. Like I still wasn't enough. And so I actually like was dating that guy at the time, and I had told him like I was suicidal and had like suicidal thoughts because everything that I hoped would like make my situation better still wasn't enough. And so it was actually 2020. This is after one of my last competitions that I did, competing in bodybuilding. And after like all the influencer parties, COVID hit. I got let go from my job at iHeartRadio, and like I really thought that was my foot in the door for my life, like my radio personality, everything. And so when I lost that job, I was just devastated. And then around March of 2020, my relationship with that guy began to fail. Like it was not
during
good.
COVID.
Yeah.
March. I mean, that's like when COVID hit.
Yeah. During COVID. And I felt so stuck because I was quite literally stuck. Like I didn't have a job. I didn't have a car. And I was living with this guy that I just like did not want to be living with anymore. Jeez. And I was in that situation from March until August. And so like the suicidal thoughts definitely progressed. I was like, I just didn't see a way out, you know, and what I had placed my hope in with like quote unquote influencing was so empty. And so this was probably March, April, May-ish of 2020. I was in my room. We had like separated at this point in our apartment. We had a 2-bedroom apartment. Like he had his own room, I had my own room, and we were just really bad roommates at that point. I saw a sermon on YouTube, and I just started watching it, and probably out of boredom, but I mean, I think God placed that there for me that day. And it was about
who was it?
It was Your Breakup by J.D. Rogers from The Porch in Texas.
Heard of The Porch? Yeah.
It's a young adult ministry.
In Dallas. Yeah.
And it just made so much sense to me. I remember like being in tears, and I was like, I need to go to church. I think I need to go to church and like try to rediscover God or like figure this out. So I started Googling churches in my area, and I found this church and decided to go to it that Sunday. And I remember walking in the door, and the worship leader actually ran right up to me, and he was like, "Hey," and I was like, "Oh, like, hi." It was completely empty because I didn't even realize churches closed. Like I assumed that during COVID, churches would
I didn't even think about that. This was in May.
Wow.
Yeah, most of them were probably closed.
Like I had no idea, but their door wasn't locked or anything, so I just went in thinking like.
Were they having a live? Were they broadcasting live, but no one was in the room?
Yeah. So I walked in.
That sounds like something
I walked in, and there was just a camera in the middle of the room. The worship team up on the platform, like rehearsing, I guess. And the worship leader was like, if you're comfortable, like we're comfortable, just like come take a seat. Yeah. And I just sat there and I was like, oh my gosh, like if this doesn't call me out.
That's an interesting first church experience.
As like the new person in church, then I don't know what else does. I was so uncomfortable.
You were so disappointed a year later when the room was full?
No, because I learned to love community. But like at the time, I just felt like all of my sins, like my entire life was just on display. You know what I mean? Like I was very much singled out, not because that's how they made me feel, but because that's how I felt on the inside.
Shame does that.
Yeah, for sure. And so I just kept coming back each Sunday. And eventually, like the worship leader and his wife, they just have me chat with them after service for a little while, and he found out that I went to school for music, and that was a love of mine. And I was really reserved. Like I really didn't tell them much about my situation. I just was super broken, and I definitely didn't feel comfortable to like open up to anybody. And so I kept coming, and eventually he convinced me to audition for the worship team, and I did, and I made it on, which helped me spend even more time with them. And
did you believe yet?
I was definitely growing in faith, but God didn't seem like enough to save me from like my immediate situation. Like I still had to go home every day and be reminded like I don't have a car, and I don't have a great home life, and like my family and I are so broken and distant, and I don't have a job. Like I was still expected to pay rent during 2020 with no job, and luckily Instagram was getting me through. I got like a partnership with Body Armor during that time, so I was just posting with Body Armor, and God was providing even then, like before I realized, but I was still able to make my rent, and things were just like, I was fighting about money with the guy I was with, and it was just so like immediate and desperate. And so I kept going to church, and I remember when things really changed, it was in August of 2020. I finally like had a breaking point in that relationship where my guy and I at the time were just fighting, and I felt like so low, like there was no way out. Terrible time. And so I was in the bathroom, and I remember like praying kind of like an ultimatum prayer to God, and I said, I am going to like peace out from this life. I don't see a point unless you prove to me that you're real. Like, I feel like I've been showing up, I've been seeking you. I feel like these people in my life that I've met, the worship leader and his wife, like they care, but it's still not enough. And if you're real, I need you to make it known to me, or like I'm going to do this. And so that was on a Saturday, and the next day was Sunday. I went to church, and nobody knew that I had like prayed that kind of like ultimatum prayer to God. And I remember after service, the worship leader and his wife approached me, and they're like, hey, like we want to invite you to live with us. They're like, we have an extra bedroom, and we would love for you to live with us. Like we feel that you're in need, and like we have space. So what do you say? And I was like, no.
You said no?
Nope.
You said no?
I said no.
Are you serious?
I'm so serious. I was like, this is my problem, my burden. Like, I did this to myself again. Like, I chose to move in with someone again, and like it's failing. And like, I feel like each situation where I moved in with a boyfriend, it was out of desperation. So like, I understand why people do it, because I've been there. Like, I had no money, no car, no family. I get why people do it, but it just felt like I couldn't put that on their family. And also, like, I just didn't want to bring that baggage into their lives. Like, what if, you know, that boyfriend reacted poorly, and then it put them in, like, a safety danger housing me, or I just had no idea how it would turn out. So I said no, but being as amazing as they are, they were like, be ready, because we're going to pick you up tomorrow, like Monday. We're coming to get you. So, like, pack your things.
Oh, wow.
And so I did not take them seriously, but Monday they did. They showed up. My boyfriend at the time was out of town, and they just started putting all my stuff in their car. And I lived with them for 4 months, like rent free, and just got to like witness their faith and see like what a marriage centered in Christ really looked like, something that I hadn't seen in my childhood, something that neither boyfriend I dated had ever been able to like fulfill for me or show me. And I remember being with them for every holiday, like Thanksgiving was around the corner, and then Christmas, and just seeing like the love of their family and how all of it was like rooted in prayer and in God. Like, it changed everything for me. And so then I started my own business coaching women in nutrition and fitness, and made it a lot less about myself and like trying to look like this picturesque like version of fitness and help other people with it. And yeah, that's kind of how the fitness came into the picture.
Wow.
So yeah,
That's crazy.
it is crazy.
So that's a fascinating story. I just love what that couple did for you. They just continued to show you love, even if you felt like you didn't earn it or deserve it or whatever. And so that kind of really led your journey here. And
well, at some point while you're leading worship, you got in an argument with somebody working in production.
His name
gosh,
is Saul.
Okay, so
Is that how you met Solomon, at that church?
this is a really cool part of the story, but like the unveiling of my whenever people are like, how'd you guys meet? It's my whole testimony. So it's like, where do I pick up in this story? But the cool thing is that the worship leader and his wife, that is actually Solomon's oldest, or one of his brothers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So what was so cool though is like they invited me, like I said, to every family holiday, and so I was very much already a part of their family's life as just like a family friend.
And you said you'd never watched anything like that.
Like seeing family dynamic like that, a healthy,
No.
or say faith-filled.
Even now, like being married, I'm having to relearn family dynamics. So it's like really
People don't
interesting
think about that.
being like re-immersed into a family and like what that really looks like and how to like serve and love each other well. That's all really new to me. And yeah, I'm just super grateful for their God intervention, that they like stepped out in boldness. I think all the time about how different my life would be had they not have been like, Yeah, I imagine the conversations between the worship leader and his wife, like, should we let this girl like live with us? Because I mean, I was not super moral at the time. Like I wasn't dressing.
I'm thinking about the wife.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know if I want a influencer bodybuilding chick living in my house.
Exactly. And like the cool thing is that there was never any weirdness like that. She never ever said anything about my character or my judgment or worried about me around her husband. Like there was never any weirdness. We all just knew in like spiritual agreements, like this is what's supposed to happen. And I later found out that they did kind of suffer some consequences from that. Like people in our church at the time thought it was inappropriate, and like their family even were like, are you guys okay? Because they had only been married, I think, for like a year and a half at the time. They were like, this is not a good idea for your marriage. And I just think about their boldness and how now I'm like fully in ministry, and it all started with someone like investing their ministry into me, you know?
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
It's so easy to underestimate what one action of love
can change a complete future.
Entire future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you met Saul there.
Yeah. So Saul was Solomon's my husband, for those listening. He was the sound guy at our church. And it's actually really funny because what Pastor Russ was talking about, we could not stand each other in the beginning. I did not like him, and he did not like me.
Really?
Yeah. I remember.
Okay, what didn't you like about him?
So
let's turn this story and get a little bit juicy now.
So first of all, he just was like, he seemed like the younger brother to me, just kind of like not super mature. And I mean, at the time, I think he was like 18 or 19, so like fresh out of high school. He was homeschooled, so not that normal either.
He's homeschool cool.
PZ, are you listening to this?
He's homeschool cool. Okay.
Yeah, I always joke I never thought I'd be married to a homeschooler and an Eagle Scout, but here we are.
Oh my gosh.
So anyways.
Oh my gosh, I can see the Eagle Scout.
Yeah, Scout's honor. Anyway, so he ran sound at our church, and I remember when I was new on the worship team, I could not figure out, like, I don't know if you guys know, but the worship team has like these earbuds in their ears that tells them when to sing. And I could not figure that whole system out. I was really struggling. And so I remember calling him over, and I was like, hey, do you think you could turn me up like in the house? Because I really can't hear myself. And he looks at me and he goes, just so you know, you never asked the sound engineer to turn you up in the house. And then walks away. And I was like, I'll never sing again. Like, I was like just so nervous at that point, felt so stupid, like had no idea. And so he thought I was a diva, and I thought he was kind of a jerk. And then I remember I eventually like gave up I did the fitness and nutrition coaching business for like a year, and I was given the opportunity to go full-time into ministry, and I was like, absolutely yes. And so I was doing social media and graphic design for my church. And I remember our youth pastor at the time, he was going into like a fireman's program. And so our church had asked Solomon and I to interimly like step in. They're like, hey, you're young. You should be in charge of the youth. You know how it goes. And so
you're slightly old enough.
I remember hearing that Saul and I would be leading the youth. And I was like, oh no, like this guy, the guy who yelled at me. You know, when I was leading worship out there working for the Lord, he made me feel dumb. Anyway, so I remember I was preparing for youth group that night, and Solomon walked through the door, and I was like, not quite how I remember you. It was like 3 years later after that moment. Yeah.
Okay.
He'd glown up.
Oh, he had,
He glowed up.
He glowed up real good.
Real good.
But he walked in, he had like a new haircut, and he was wearing like a jean jacket from Target, and I was like, and I remember going to my now sister-in-law and being like, do you think it's inappropriate that I think I like Solomon? She was like, no, now we can really be sisters. And so the rest is history. We fell in love through worship, through like seeing his heart for the kids, seeing his heart for God, and like just realizing how much he had grown up. And we have a little bit of an age gap, but the Lord works in mysterious ways.
You're like 12 years older than him? Is that
Not 12.
Did you say you were about 15 years older than him?
Yeah, that's right.
You're not quite
but
that
much. But it
much.
is interesting, you because you're older than him by how many years, can I ask?
6.5.
So he's 23?
He's 23. I'm 29.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'll hear cougar jokes for the rest of my life.
Oh, yeah. It is funny when you're young. Age is a really big thing, and then once everybody matures and get this, it doesn't seem like as big a deal. But
well, I remember Saul tells this story so funny, but when he first saw him, because he was running sound when I auditioned for the worship team, and so when I walked in, apparently he asked his brother afterwards. He was like, "Who's that girl?" And he was like, "Don't think about it. She's way older than you and she has a boyfriend." And so it's just funny in hindsight that now we're married. So yeah.
I have a question then. How did, when you and Saul first got together, and you're telling, or maybe he already knew because of that, how much of your history impacted dating? You guys, obviously you're a bit older. You had quite a bit of different life experience probably than homeschool Solomon did. And
what does that mean?
You know, well, living in Key West, in Chicago, living with boyfriends, living homeless, you know, struggling. I mean, it's a fascinating, your story's fascinating.
Yeah.
And you've obviously been on a journey, and I don't know all that, but I know you now, and I can just, you seem, I don't know, it is interesting hearing that, because what I do know of you, as I know of you now, there doesn't seem to be a trace of that story, even though I know it's part of you.
It's a great way to put it.
But I feel like that's the transformation that you've gone through with God. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And but I'm just so curious. Like, I just imagine that dating process and early on in your story. How did that affect or impact even you guys dating or marriage or any of that?
Well, I just want to speak really quick to the transformation, I guess, that God placed on my heart. I remember reading a quote by Christine Kane that said, "Wake up every day and say, Lord, I wake up every day in joyful anticipation about what you're about to do in my life." And I just adopted that as my attitude. It all started with changing my attitude. You know, you spoke, Pastor Russ, to shame, like removing the shame. And that's why there's not a trace there anymore, because I believe like you can be a new creation in Christ. And what I appreciate about him is he never held that against me. Like, he never saw me as like damaged goods or less than just because I had experienced things that I shouldn't have, you know, within the Christian world. You know, there's like the no-nos. But that's also like the beauty of knowing Jesus is none of that matters once you come to like the knowledge of him. And that's what I love about our dating story is I know his family definitely had concerns about me. It's not what they probably pictured for, like you said, homeschooled Solomon, who like never
I bet they adore you now.
Yeah. We have a great relationship, and you know, I think they are great family for looking out for him. And I was still kind of new in my faith, so you know, I totally understand their concerns, but I know from personal experience my life has gone a complete like 180. So.
It seems like that. Okay, that 180 change. What are some? I'm so curious. I just want to get into some kind of like funny, but like real, as you kind of are really coming to faith.
Yeah.
And you are changing. What are some of the last things that hung on in your life that you felt like, I mean, I don't know, from your, I want to say before Christ experience in life, what are some of the last things that in that process that kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, like when was the last time like you really sinned?
Yeah, when was the last time you, like what were the last cuss words that you used most often? And no, I'm just kidding. Like what was it? I think the reason why I ask is because I think there's a lot of people that could be listening. They find themselves someplace in a you know, somewhere between, yeah, I've got a story. It may not look like that, but of a journey of running to I'm in a place where I feel like God's changing me. But I think sometimes when people see, I know you because I want to say the product of Addie, because you do still very much do as it's a ministry, but influencing. But it is definitely, I'm sure, very different than your previous stuff. It's not about. You are doing about fitness. I take it back. There is some new stuff about fitness now. She's getting back into it. I like it. A
little bit.
But I think it's different. But I think the same. I don't want to say deception because it's not an intentional deception. The same perspective or thing exists even now. If I were to get on your Instagram now, and this is what most people do, and I assume you did, which is I'm going to scrub my history. I'm only going to have my current where I am and where I'm going. And so I think even people that they could look at that and go, gosh, she's got her own podcast. She's just such a godly, just like, my gosh, I am nothing like that. And I think it's right because that's what we put on Instagram.
Right.
And I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that's where you are in your journey, in your process. And I think there are people who will feel, I'm somewhere in between Key West Addie and Christ and me Addie.
Yeah.
and Christ and Key West.
I'm somewhere in between. You know what I mean? And so I think that's, I think, how do you speak to people who are kind of in that journey? What did it look like for you? Yeah. Be real. You know what I mean? In this part of it.
I think that's a big question, but I think the biggest thing to like unpack in that is that I never did any of it in my own strength. Like there were plenty of days where I was crying, asking God, like, did I make the right choice? Because this feels so hard, like to undo all that's been done. And what I love about God is he was never like, you don't have to undo any of this. You just have to step into like what's new. And so for me, I did clean up my Instagram, but it wasn't like, I still keep a lot of my parts of my story on there. One of my like top pinned videos is my story of how I got out of competing in fitness. And I think I went through this period of like extremes for sure when I became Christian, where I was like, okay, well, fake nails and Botox and like hair extensions and all these things led me astray before, so I need to completely cut them out of my life. And so hearing my story, I hope you don't think that like bodybuilding or fake nails or hair extensions or any of that is inherently wrong. Right. But for me at that time, they were. Yeah. They like my motivation was wrong. And so you said, now I'm jumping back into fitness. There have been some people who have ridiculed me and been like, I see you're just going right back to where you came from. And it's like, well, no, because like my heart is completely different. Yeah. The angles that I'm like shooting these videos from, completely different. The outfits I'm wearing when I shoot these videos, completely different. And the reason that I'm posting them is because I believe that physical health, spiritual health, and emotional health are all intertwined. Yeah. And so I think a lot of times we can jump to these extremes, like try to push our convictions on others, all these things. And I think really at the core of it, we have to understand one another. And so could someone hop on my account now and assume like, oh, you've been this like wonderful little Christian girl like your whole life? Sure, they probably could, but I think that speaks more about where their heart is at than where mine is at now.
I don't know if that answers your question. I think what I heard him asking is like, where's the struggle still been real?
In that journey, yeah.
In that
journey.
I
love what you said, though, and I think it's a great point. People jump on there because I think there is today in our community, especially you moved to a new community where the previous one, they were in touch with a little bit of your past and your transformation, but you come here. First of all, I think it's encouraging for people to hear the other part of your story, which you're not. You do have some of that. I've seen some of that on there. I think to me, I think so many people are usually ashamed or embarrassed of their story and their testimony. I'm like, no, this is really powerful because when I see you today, I realize, wow, you're not even the same person. And so I love that. I was just trying to think like, even so, I guess I was saying along the journey where you have this kind of transforming moment, there had to have been a moment, I assume, where you just like surrendered to God, right? And you're around a lot of people, I think, and I think living with them and other people is probably accelerated to kind of just say your discipleship process.
Absolutely. I think that's like the biggest blessing. I had like literal, essentially pastors, basically, like people in the church that I was living with who could answer any question I had about the Bible at any given moment. Like I could just see the fruits of their life every day. Like I understand that that's a luxury that most people are not. It was so much easier to stay quote unquote on track because I lived in the accountability of their house. Like I couldn't take a guy home. I couldn't come home drunk. Like I didn't want to fail them. And so I think for people who are living in the in-between, it really takes, because once I moved out I lived with them for 4 months. Okay. And once I moved out and got my own apartment, got my own car, like got back on my feet, I had to like keep myself from falling back into my old ways just because I didn't have their accountability anymore. And so I had to take like actionable steps. And I think a big part of that was removing the mentality that like I was a victim, because I think for too long I saw myself as like a victim of the first boyfriend and the hurricane took all my stuff, and then a victim of the second boyfriend and like he didn't treat me right, and and taking away that and being like, okay, God, what do you want for me? And it just started with conversations like that where I stopped beating myself up in the shame, beating myself up in this like victim mentality, and just again that Christine Kane quote, just I told Pastor Russ this when we were talking once. I just choose optimism, which I think a lot of times people misunderstand for being naive. Right. But I would much rather live in the optimism of God than to reflect so like deeply and depressingly on my past mistakes. And so when I moved into that apartment, maybe this is TMI, maybe it's not, I bought a new mattress for myself, and I hung a Proverbs 31 verse, she is clothed in strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come with faithful instruction on her tongue. I hung that above my bed, and I just said, like, okay, Lord, I make a pact with you right here, right now, that, like, this bed will remain, like, till my marriage. Like, I start new today in you, and I'm putting this verse up as accountability between you and myself, that I will not bring somebody back here. I will not give into my own ways, because in all truthfulness, like, I'm human then. I was human now. And like, I would have lonely days where it was like, it would be much easier to go pick someone up at a bar than it would be to actually sit through the pain of like this transformation. And I'm so grateful I never gave in, but I know that there are people out there who have given in and have to restart time and time again. But what I love about the Lord is that he'll meet you each time. And it's really about mentality.
I like that. You said a phrase that I've always found powerful: sit in the pain.
Yeah.
Sit through the pain. Sometimes you do have to sit in the pain. How did you do that without going crazy? What did it look
I got
like
a
for you to sit in the
dog.
pain?
That helped a lot. I'm not gonna lie. I got a dog, and I just used her
You
as
got
like
a wolf.
Yeah, I do. I used her as my social buffer. Yeah, for sure. I just, like, anytime that I would get too in my thoughts, I would take my dog and we'd go for a walk. Like, I would just put myself in new situations where I could meet people, talk to people, but they had to be different from my last ones, right? So it wasn't at a bar. It wasn't on Tinder scrolling all night. Like, I had to change my habits and my patterns if I wanted, everybody says it's really overdone, but Einstein's quote, right, about,
come on,
that if you do the same thing over and over again with the same result, that's like the definition of insanity. And so I was like, I need different results. Like, I moved in with a boyfriend once, that failed. I did it again twice, that failed. And I'm not going to do it again now, thinking that things will be different. So I just chose, I was like, okay, God, like, my way has failed time and time again, so I guess I'm going to try your way.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, I think I love your story. I think it's honest, it's raw, it's real. I think it's really cool to see you today. I obviously didn't know you then, but I see a very authentic thing in you today. And that is the beauty of, what Scripture says, that 2 Corinthians 5:17 is that we become a new creation. Anyone's in Christ, he's a new creation, and the old is gone. It's like, as we're standing here today, it's like the old is really gone. I mean, the story isn't gone, but the habits and the mindset, it feels very renewed.
Yeah.
And so you're creating a beautiful story, and you and Solomon are married. You have 3 kids.
No.
Okay.
We have 1 kid, and she's a dog.
Yeah. Okay. So you guys are married. You guys have a dog. You guys are connected and getting involved here and doing such a great job and finding community. I think you spoke to that. You had to change your circle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Like to fall back into, I'm just going to go to the bar and I might pick someone up and do this, or go back into that. You had to change your circle.
Yeah.
And what's ironic about that is now that we brought you on staff, that's your job.
It's helping people find circles.
People find community.
I know,
and
it's crazy.
You're our circle director. You have done an incredible job just continuing to oversee the launch. And we have how many circles? How many small groups?
Yeah, like 40 this season,
40
which is
this
crazy.
season,
And I'm leading one.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's actually crazy. So right now I'm going through a book on like sexuality and singleness with some women who are like fresh out of breakups or like in a relationship that they're trying to get out of, just really similar situations. And it really does feel like a, no pun intended, but like full circle moment, because that's where I healed and grew the most, is when people were willing to have those like maybe taboo conversations with me. And that's like really something that my heart is about, is helping like remove some of those maybe like
stigmas.
Yeah, about purity culture, like, just ways that maybe we got it wrong in that movement, and open up that conversation to talk about like why we wait till marriage, like why it's important. And that's really important to me.
It's funny, I wrote down the other day that I feel like there are a list of like 8 things right now that, because of a bad taste, have been thrown out as a meal altogether. Honor, purity, loyalty, masculinity, maybe we'll talk about that at some point, authority, and so I think it's a good conversation to have, because it is so easy for people to be scarred by the abuse of something on one end, but then also to be damaged on the other end when the whole thing's thrown out altogether because of the abuse.
I mean, I did that with Jesus for how long, like I knew kind of him growing up Catholic, but never the love of him. I knew of like the rule and the ritual and like what happened if I embarrassed my family within the Catholic Church. And it was almost like, okay, you can kind of do these things in secret as long as it doesn't surface and embarrass the family. That's a lot of how it felt sitting in the pews. It was an empty religion for myself personally. And I think one of the biggest things is people have church hurt and then they throw out Jesus altogether when like they never knew him. And so I always joke like I was healed in the same place that I was hurt, which was church and in circles and in community, when I actually gave him the chance to show me who he was.
I love it.
Do you just as I was thinking, has anything changed with your actual family since you've kind of
well,
changed?
my family is like different, I guess, in the way that my parents' divorce was like something straight out of a like movie. So it was an extreme situation for sure. I mean, to the point where my mom was removed from 4 children and placed with the father. Like that almost never happens, you know? So she actually had custody like fully removed because of her decisions and life choices. And I totally forgot what your question was.
Well, I was just wondering if you talked about kind of being very estranged from your family. Is your story? I didn't know if any of that has changed. Obviously, it sounds like you have a wonderful new family. That's the beautiful thing. I mean, you got church family, but then you also have Solomon's family, and they've created that sense of family for you. I was just wondering where, if anything's changed with your actual family.
Our wedding season was definitely an interesting time. Like, we just kind of adopted the motto jokingly of like show up and shut up, because everybody just kind of had something to say about it. Like there's family who has gone the complete opposite direction where they're very like LGBTQ supportive, like want nothing to do with the church. And then there's family in the opposite direction who are like still so Catholic. And I feel like us being non-denominational now, we're just like, I just say Christian, like we just love Jesus and we believe in the Bible, it was crazy during our wedding season how much of a like fight that became. Like people didn't want to come because they believed this, or like it wasn't a Catholic wedding so people didn't want to come. And it was like, guys, we're just asking you to come like enjoy a free meal, be present. You don't gotta declare your political beliefs or like your sexuality to come sit here. Like just come, like please just come. And so it was a trying time, but I also think a very amending time. And my whole family did come, which was great, with the exception of my mom, just because I haven't talked to her since I was 13. And, so I'm hopeful. Like, I believe the Lord restored me. He can restore that situation. And I think for the longest time, I looked at it as, like, I need a new situation and never fully gave it to God that, like, you can restore even the previous one. And so I believe for revival.
There you go.
Wow, love it. Come on. I mean, one last question. We're going to wrap up. Very, very important. Put you on the spot with this. Okay. What don't you think and pray hard for?
Okay. This is not going to be a real question. Whenever he sets it up this way, it's
Do
not
I
real.
have any single friends? No.
Okay. Hey. Listen, we'll talk about that. Well done. No, we'll talk about that later. I was going to say, you as a longtime listener and watcher.
Yeah.
We need to know your top 3 episodes.
Top 3? Okay, let's be real.
Dude, I couldn't tell you a top 1.
You talk about like a hodgepodge in every episode.
Yeah.
There's like 30 titles per each episode. So
There's 3? So, okay. Corrected. Keep going.
I think my favorite episode that I've listened to date was the one where you talked about who you're voting for this year.
Okay. Now you sound like me.
I like that one. Well done. Well, thank you for coming on here and just sharing a little bit of your story, your journey. I know it'll connect with people because I think from Key West to Christ and me, somewhere in between, we're all living somewhere in between. And so I think that hopefully if people hear that, I hope if anything people hear it, maybe someone sends us to someone, it just gives a little hope to somebody who feels really down, just to go from your experiences and where you felt stuck to you guys have been married for just over a year.
We're going to be married a year in July.
Wow. Oh, so not even a year.
Not even
so
a
you're
year.
coming up on your 1-year anniversary. So you just really have I don't know, just an exciting future, I think, ahead. It's not always going to be perfect, and you know that.
Yeah.
But I feel like God's answered your prayers, even the one that you prayed where you were like, I can't live anymore if you don't show me you're real. And next day, someone says, come live with us.
Yeah.
And makes it happen. Like if you can't see that there's God answering your prayer in that. I don't know what it is, and I know there's other people who probably prayed similar things, and so I hope if anything it's encouragement to people.
Yeah, I hope that anybody listening like knows that life right now is by no means like perfect. And I love how I'm like a patchwork person. That's what I always say. Like, I was not Christian my whole life. Like, in every way, seemingly, I should be discredited for ministry, but he actually credited me in the process of living an imperfect life. And like, I'm so grateful to be here now and to be someone who can, I hope, relate to people in the church who might have like a patchwork life as well.
Love it. Well, thank you for being on. And go follow her.
Okay.
And go support her podcast. And until next time, we will see you next week. Hey guys, it's Russ. Thanks so much for listening. We really believe if we can get around tables instead of behind screens, if we can talk to each other instead of at each other, we can make the world better. To help us do that, here are a few things you can do to help. First, if you haven't yet, leave a review on Apple or Spotify and hit subscribe on YouTube. This helps more than you know. Also, if you have been impacted by the community out of which this podcast comes, that's X Church. Maybe you're local or you've been touched by the messages and impact across the country, even the world. I want to encourage you to support this work. A powerful life principle is to invest in the people and places that invest in you. And so I want to invite you to do that right now by going to thex.church/give. You can give a one-time small gift, a sacrificial gift, or even become a recurring partner. Together, let's keep elevating the conversation, thinking higher, loving deeper, and making the world better. Cheers.